Even if you go no closer to the sea than sticking one toe in the water on a summer holiday, you almost certainly have a built-in horror and fear of sharks. Sharks have a very bad reputation. A survival underwater team has been studying the behavior of sharks over a wide range of the Pacific. When you've seen the result of the researches, you may not feel any less fear for sharks, but you may perhaps admire them for the magnificent creatures they are and understand them a little better. We shall separate the comparatively harmless from the likely killers. We'll discover what motivates them to attack and how aggressive some of them really are. Perhaps we'll even be able to take some of the horror and dread out of the word shark. If any species deservedly gives sharks a bad name, it is this demon, otherwise known as the great white shark and sometimes as the White Death. This is the beast that wields those famous jaws. The great white is the world's largest predatory fish. It can reach 21 feet in length and weigh up to 3 tons. It holds the dubious record of having made more attacks on man than any other shark species. It is impossible to pretend that the great white is anything but what it is, a killer of fish, turtles, sea lions, and men. It even attacks boats. It's distributed over most of the temperate seas of the world and even penetrates the Mediterranean. No one takes chances with the great white. Even the protection of the team's shark cage seemed mighty flimsy when one of these monsters was swimming around their boat. The extensible jaw, the better to bite with. And what bites? This Australian diver, Henri Bourse, lost a right leg to a great white off Melbourne. Another Australian, Rodney Fox, survived an attack by a great white that exposed ribcage, lungs and stomach. So much for the arch-villain of the shark scene, but now for a wider view of sharks as a whole. This is the largest of them all. The whale shark grows to 60 feet and weighs up to 90,000 pounds. It has 3,000 teeth and doesn't use any of them. That's because it's largely a plankton feeder. It's of a friendly disposition, but a word of warning. A pair of boots was found in the stomach of one specimen. Friendliness is not the most noted characteristic of the bizarre-looking hammerhead. It has been known to attack man. In the 350 million years that sharks have been around on Earth, they've evolved some strange forms. This is one of the strangest of the 300 shark species swimming in the oceans today. It's a Pacific angelfish. With its flattened appearance, it looks like a ray, but it's a true shark. Like many of the bottom-living sharks, it's quite harmless. Just like a ray, it often buries itself in sand. The horn shark, too, is completely harmless to man, apart from destroying his shellfish beds. It feeds largely on mollusks and crustaceans. There are the specialized crushing teeth with which it does the job. Some sharks give birth to live young. Others carry their eggs inside their bodies, where the embryos hatch just before they're born. A third group expels its eggs in leathery cases and then leaves them to hatch. Off the Californian coast, the camera team was lucky to discover the spiral egg cases of a horn shark. This so-called mermaid's purse shelters a swell shark embryo. It will emerge in about 5 months. Egg cases are mostly laid by bottom-living sharks. The Australian wobbegong is one of the weirdest of the bottom feeders. Wobbegong, an Aboriginal word, is one of the carpet sharks, beautifully camouflaged even down to the algae-like growths around its mouth. This shark rejoices in the name Heterodontus portus jacksoni. It's the Port Jackson shark of Australia, another harmless shallow water species. This large creature, being caressed by Australian photographer Valerie Taylor, is known down under as a tawny shark. Almost everywhere else, it's called a nurse shark. It's a bottom feeder with an unusually docile nature. It does have one unpleasant characteristic, though. If it does bite, it clamps on like a bulldog. Only death makes it leave go, and even then the jaws may have to be prized open. The leopard shark is a close relative of our own dogfish, often politely known as rock salmon. It's not widely known that the fried fish you often get with your chips is really a small shark. Though rather larger, the leopard is a member of the dogfish or smooth hound family. And so we come to the shark-shaped sharks, the ones that understandably inspire terror. The sharks with undershot jaws and triangular dorsal fins, usually shown menacingly cutting the surface. The sharks, in fact, whose habits and behavior, menacing and otherwise, we'll be investigating. Sharks have few friends, but these shark suckers, or remoras, hitching a ride behind the dorsal fin, might just qualify. The survival team began its operations in mid-Pacific. It chose Rangiroa Island because its scientific advisors, Dr. Don Nelson and Richard Johnson, had done much of their shark research here. Men have been in close contact with the sharks of Rangiroa for hundreds of years, often in too close contact. 6 years ago, a shark almost completely tore the calf muscle from the right leg of this Polynesian spear fisherman. Yet he continues to fish for his living, believing that the encounter was just an unlucky accident, and that provided you read the signs right and abide by the rules, the chances of it happening again are very slight, as long as the sharks abide by the rules as well. The fishermen maintain that this is exactly what the sharks do. They say that both they and the resident sharks are predators on the fish shoals off Rangiroa, and that the sharks seem to recognize the fact. Some of the rules that have to be obeyed concern the handling of speared and particularly still struggling fish whenever sharks are around. Get the catch to the surface quickly. Get under cover of the boat as soon as possible. These are elementary and obvious precautions. More important is the fact that the fishermen have come to recognize, through years of experience, when a shark means trouble. They can tell by its swimming attitude and body posture. An occasional fish has to be sacrificed to these rival fishermen. It's a small price to pay for coexistence. That the human fishermen can coexist at all is due entirely to their instinctive recognition of what triggers off shark attack. That recognition fits closely with what Don Nelson and Richard Johnson have been finding out scientifically over several years of study. The first species the team encountered is extremely active at night, an eerie time to go looking for a shark, especially one that averages 8 feet in length. The white-tip reef shark is extremely well equipped with strong cutting and sawing teeth. It also has an inquisitive and persistent nature, and so must be treated with respect, though there are few records of the white-tip attacking man. It tends to hunt the bottom layers for small fish and octopus. On the reefs off Rangiroa, it's partial to coral caves, where it would be only too easy for the divers to block its escape route. However, a shark that means to be aggressive usually gives quite definite signs. These white-tips are swimming in a completely normal and relaxed fashion. Lesson 1, therefore, is that by no means all of the deadly-looking sharks are really dangerous, though this is rather like saying that by no means all wild fungi are poisonous. The trick is to recognize the lethal ones. It has to be admitted, though, that the reef white-tip in this night dive weren't exposed to any feeding stimuli. That experiment comes next, and with a potentially far more dangerous species. Sharks do not seem to be territorial or to defend a given part of a reef. However, the team discovered through telemetry that they're much more regular in their habits than previously suspected. Telemetry means attaching small sonar transmitters to the subjects of the experiment. With a shark, there's only one way to do this: persuade the fish to swallow it. Don Nelson inserts the transmitter inside a dead bait fish. The mouth of the fish is sewn up, and with luck, the shark will soon be sending out underwater signals. The rest of the equipment consists of receiver and an underwater directional microphone. The signals transmitted by the shark can be picked up through a mile or more of water. And here's the intended object of the experiment, a grey reef shark. Out in the channel between the islands frequented by greys, the transmitter-equipped fish is attached to a float and lowered over the side. One of the diving team goes down to supervise the pickup, and the receiver is switched on. A grey reef shark moves in. Though sharks tear at large prey, they swallow small fish whole. The bait is seized. The first shark just takes the tail. Stimulated by the feeding activity, the greys move in. This too is a moment the divers have learned to watch. At Rangiroa, more greys have attacked fishermen than any other species. At last, a grey swallows the head of the bait containing the transmitter and makes off with it. Telemetry of this and other grey reef sharks in the channel at Rangiroa has revealed some astonishing things about the regularity of their habits. Greys, which often hunt in packs, seem to lead a solitary life on occasions. One individual spent each part of his day in a different location, moving regularly and on time to his next point of call. In the case of the transmitter just swallowed, Don Nelson was able to get a fix on the shark and follow it for some distance.
Let's circle around.
When the signals finally indicated that the sonar-bearing shark was directly below, the team found the fish had led them to a concentration of greys at a location they'd never suspected to be occupied by a whole pack. Among their other amazing abilities, sharks are equipped with the most efficient prey detection devices. Since these same sensory organs are the ones that put man most at risk, it's vital to understand how they work and what they respond to. To avoid awakening those responses is probably man's best defense against shark attack. One of the major stimuli that leads sharks to their prey is sound, the sort of low-frequency noises made by a struggling or wounded fish. Here, the team prepares to create such sounds electronically and within range of the gathering of grey reef sharks. Sharks can detect both short and long-range sounds, the latter up to distances of several hundred yards. The artificially created sounds may create a potentially dangerous situation. To a shark, the sound is exactly like the struggle of a wounded fish. The greys gradually move in. They become more curious and excited. Then come the signs for which the diver must watch. The aggressive display, which seems to have nothing to do with feeding motivation, but which often precedes an attack. It's betrayed by a series of exaggerated swimming movements. Watch that grey in the background. The swimming action doesn't look very significant until you break it down and analyze it. The snout is lifted and the back is arched. The pectoral fins point stiffly downwards. The aggression may be directed at another shark, but it's a warning to the diver either to stay still or to back away slowly. Flight is often likely to trigger attack. Sharks have extremely well-developed senses of taste and smell. When a bundle of dead fish is fixed to the seabed, they can detect their smell from a great distance and soon home in on the target. With sharks excited by both sound and smell, it was time for the diving team to move to a safe distance. A feeding frenzy can develop in a very short time, with reef whitetips, blacktip reef sharks and greys all joining in. At times like this, even comparatively harmless species can lash out in competition with each other. In such a situation, there's probably no such thing as a harmless shark. Far from harmless was one of the next sharks the team encountered. To find it, they traveled halfway across the Pacific to the coast of California. Sharks aren't by any means confined to tropical seas. This blue shark is common round the south coast of Britain. It's not by nature a man-eater, though the blue is the very model of what most people think a killer shark should look like. It is often accompanied by smaller fish which feed on the scraps left over from the shark's own meals of larger fish. They're safe if they stay where they are. As a fish eater, the blue is equipped with the hunting devices that sharks have evolved over 350 million years. The large eyes give fair sight, though it's better at spotting movement than shape. Nasal pits detect smells more dilute than 1 part per million. Along the flank, this is a mako shark, there's a row of nerve endings and sensitive pits called the lateral line. These can detect movement of prey at close ranges. Motive power comes mainly from a tail whose upper lobe is usually far larger than the lower one. The downward drive of this causes the shark to plane forward on its flattened undersurface and wing-like pectoral fins. A great deal remains to be learned about sharks, particularly about their sensory apparatus. To carry out a series of experiments, mainly on the blue shark, the underwater team journeyed to a group of islands off the California coast, Santa Catalina and San Clemente. The water in this region is quite warm enough to suit several species of shark. It's also rich in underwater vegetation and the fish life on which blues and other more dangerous sharks live. This is a large bat ray. Californian sea lions hunt the giant kelp beds. Sea lion mothers are no lovers of sharks. There is at least one species here, the mako, that sometimes eats their pups. Fear of sharks is a possible reason for this sea lion cow's agitation. In these waters, a shark cage is necessary because you can never be quite sure, 60 miles from the coast, what is going to turn up. In charge of photography was Stan Waterman, and behind him Chuck Nicklin and Howard Hall, all extremely experienced in working with sharks. Clarice Prang, a young scientist studying locomotion and the bite power of sharks, joined the team.
I knew he was making an easy judgment.
The safety cage was able to ascend and descend like a lift by means of compressed air. Attracted by ground baiting from the boat with oily dead fish, a very large blue shark was early on the scene. It's always a gamble whether sharks are going to turn up when you want them. Once one fish comes to the ground bait, others are likely to follow. So the whole photographic team goes over the side to meet their guests. When a team as large as this is working with sharks, it's only too easy for one of them to be surprised by an unexpected attack. So the group includes safety men, whose job is to watch for danger. They're armed with explosive powerheads only to be used in extreme emergency. These primitive organisms drifting past are colonial salps. Primitive they may be, but salps were one of the first creatures to have rudimentary backbones. On the very first dive, the team struck it lucky. Big blues, detecting the smell of the ground bait, began to show up in considerable numbers. As sharks go, blues have a pleasant disposition, though it would never do to take this for granted. When excited in a feeding frenzy, even they are likely to lash out. Nor should a diver be fooled by that undershot mouth. A blue shark doesn't have to roll on its back to bite any more than does any other shark. A movable jaw that pushes the teeth forward sees to that. When a shoal of food fish appears, the danger men keep an extra sharp lookout. The attitude of the apparently docile blues could change. Then a potentially lethal hammerhead appears. The shark with eyes on stalks has a reputation for attacking man. This hammerhead is about 10 feet long. The horizontal plane on which the eyes are mounted doesn't hinder the hammerhead when it comes to biting. But no sooner has the hammerhead gone than the even more unpleasant mako shark arrives. This is the species the team had been hoping to film, and the reason they had brought the safety cage. As soon as the mako arrived on the scene, several sea lion cows appeared, as if to keep their eye on the big killer who sometimes snatches their pups from around the nearby islands. For a diver, a shark feeding frenzy is a thing to stay well clear of. The excited feeding activity that follows was created by heavy baiting with dead fish so that it could be mainly filmed in safety from the surface. It illustrates a number of fascinating things about shark behavior. A blue shark savages the basket containing the ground bait. The typical seizing, shaking and sawing action of the bite. Keeping close to the cage, the team did film some of the action with a more predictable blues from underwater. A frenzied blue takes a bite out of a companion. This blue wasn't going to let go at any price, even risking being hauled out of the water. The jaw opens to snatch a fish head. It's when the water becomes clouded with fragments of tissue and blood that the sharks appear like vultures on a kill. Blues so far, but suddenly there's a stranger in their midst, a mako. It has more evenly sized upper and lower lobes of the tail and shorter jaws armed with some particularly ferocious teeth. And here in a small mako are those teeth. Their main purpose is to hold a fish once it's caught. During the filming of the sequence you've just seen, diver Steve Early got raked across the head by a shark. Luckily, only his wetsuit hood was damaged. To kill a shark was the last thing the team wanted. They maintain that recent fiction and feature films have resulted in divers killing far too many sharks on sight or for so-called sport. Nevertheless, during the filming, the responsibility for protecting the team lies with the safety men. This was the one occasion they judged that the Mako was about to attack. The safety man had to make an instant decision to fire his powerhead. There's no bullet in it. A blank charge does the damage. A number of sharks bore large wounds which were almost certainly the result of attacks, probably unintentional, by their own kind during feeding frenzies. An unusual species of remora, or shark sucker, is attached to this badly scarred blue. No one has ever tried hand-feeding blue sharks before. The team found it was fairly safe, provided there wasn't too much fish blood in the water to excite the sharks to a frenzy. Anyone who wishes to discourage unwelcome attentions from a shark is advised not to grab it by the fins. Even a small fish is too strong to hold, and it gets rather angry. A safer way to deal with a boisterous shark is to seize it by the nose. This one went temporarily limp. Richard Johnson, one of the team's advisors, advocates banging an attacking shark on the nose as a final resort. The nose is where many of its sensory systems are concentrated. During this part of the filming, casualties were fortunately light. Only cameraman Howard Hall came too close to a shark while it was shaking its prey.
That's right, pal. Right.
Once the shark grounds had been firmly located by those comparatively mild encounters, the time had come to begin a series of experiments which were the major purpose of the expedition. The first concerned the means by which blue and mako sharks detect fish prey, and for that matter human prey. A lot still remains to be discovered that may one day help the survivors of shipwrecks and air disasters. The object of the first experiment was to test the relative strengths of three main feeding stimuli. First, for smell. This container was packed with oily fish bits whose effect on sharks has already been seen. Big makos were soon on the spot. So were the big blues. Beyond the fish bits is a container holding a transmitter of low-frequency struggling sound similar to that used in Rangiroa. The waving white object is a visual attractor, a dummy squid. Squid are a particular shark delicacy. The question was, which of the 3 known shark attractors would achieve the most response? The electronic fish begins its simulated struggles. At the first attempt, a number of sharks arrived and milled around indiscriminately. This was thought to be because too much fish oil had accidentally been released. The next day, the experiment was tried when there were known to be no sharks in the immediate area. The result, though far from conclusive, was more interesting. A single blue arrived. It approached the sonar device. Then it headed for the fish-baited lure, attracted by the oily smell. It nosed this for some time. Then it made off as if to inspect the other attractors. Having circled the visual signal and apparently dismissed it, it became strongly attached to the audio imitation of a struggling fish and actually mouthed the transmitter. Of course, such tests have to be carried out at length and with many different species, but this blue shark does seem to suggest that it finds the sound of a wounded fish irresistible. It doesn't care for the visual enticement of the beckoning squid. This backs up the belief that sharks' eyesight is used mainly in the initial approach. Unless it then finds attractive sounds or smells, it probably doesn't stay around long. Scientist Clarice Prang's study concerns shark locomotion, the precise manner in which they swim, and also the bite power of the jaws. Clarice worked mainly from inside the cage. She takes her bulky slow-motion camera from a teammate. To give her the close-ups she needs, the baits were attached directly to the outside of the cage, one of them containing a bite gauge. Straight away, Clarice began to wonder who was watching whom. Chuck Micklin adjusts the fish inside which a bite gauge has been planted. The gauge consists of a metal rod surrounded by ball bearings. The amount by which the rod is dented by the ball bearings gives a reading in pounds per square inch of force exerted. Soon there is a fine gathering of sharks around. It's typical of sharks, when unsure of themselves, that they circle the prey, getting closer and closer as their confidence builds, another piece of behavior that divers would do well to remember. Eventually, when the circle gets small enough and their confidence big enough, they usually move in for the kill. In this case, it's the closeness of bait to cage that is disconcerting them, but soon they'll overcome their apprehension. Here comes the first attack on the bite gauge. The shark's eyelids close, presumably to protect the eye when it shakes the bait. This big blue has taken an ordinary fish bait, but the nearer one has got a second bite gauge. The tube can be seen nearly out of the fish as the shark shakes the bait. In fact, this small blue was more intent on shaking than biting, and eventually shook the gauge right out of the fish. Chuck Nicklin was able to retrieve the gauge in order to load it inside another bait. While he did so, he was besieged by sharks virtually storming the cage to get at the baits. This blue has the tail end of one of the fish it's just swallowed protruding from a gill slit. On the last day of filming off San Diego, the big makos grew bold enough to turn up in force around the cage. The bite gauge was waiting for them. At the trailing edge of this mako's dorsal and pectoral fins, there are streamer-like parasites. A little discouragement until both cameras are ready. At last, both cameramen are ready to film, but now the mako is reluctant. At the first attempt, the shark simply cuts the rope. Finally, a perfect grab. These mako bites were later analyzed. The tips of the shark's teeth were found to have exerted a pressure of 8,000 pounds per square inch. These, then, are some of the facts about sharks. Terrifying as they are to most people, they are also wonderful and awe-inspiring creatures. And their menace must be kept in proportion. Fewer than 100 shark attacks on man occur yearly, and less than half of these are fatal. On the other hand, 300 people a year die from bee stings in the United States alone, though it must be said that a lot more people are exposed to bees than to sharks. Thanks to the work of men like Don Nelson and Richard Johnson, we are learning that sharks are not completely unpredictable killers. Their recent discoveries about shark behavior will certainly help to save human lives.